Everyone knows the Hollywood version of the Oakland A's. You picture Brad Pitt, the analytics revolution, and the romantic idea that a small team can outsmart the Giants. But that movie ended 20 years ago. Today, the reality is a financial horror story. This isn't just a sports saga, it is a brutal case study in asset mismanagement and a massive real estate gamble. On paper, the franchise valuation has bloated to $1.8 billion. But look closer at the P&L and you see revenue plummeting to near league lows. We are performing a forensic audit on the move to Las Vegas, the $380 million public subsidy, and the management decisions of owner John Fisher. This is how a billion-dollar asset rots from the inside out. To understand the collapse, you have to deconstruct the moneyball myth itself. For decades, we treated this efficiency as genius. In reality, it was a survival mechanism for a franchise that refused to invest in its core product. It works in a movie, it fails in modern business because it ignores the customer. Let's look at the revenue waterfall. In 2019, the Athletics generated roughly $225 million. Then the pandemic hit, dropping that to $104 million in 2020. That drop happened to everyone. The problem is the recovery. While peers bounced back, the A's stagnated. Why? Because ownership implemented what I call the tanking tax. By consistently stripping the roster and keeping payrolls often below $60 million, essentially the floor of the league, ownership actively destroyed the customer lifetime value of their fan base. In the subscription economy, churn is the enemy. John Fisher's strategy was essentially to induce churn. You cannot build brand loyalty when your favorite employee is sold the moment they become valuable. The financial consequences of this are visible in the sponsorship erosion. When you treat the product with contempt, corporate partners leave. We saw annual sponsorship revenue fall from a peak of $12 million down to a projected $6 million. That is a 50% destruction of B2B revenue. But here's the secret. Fisher likely didn't care about the baseball revenue. The entire franchise was leveraged as a placeholder for a real estate play called Howard Terminal. This was a massive $12 billion proposal for a waterfront district, condos, retail, offices. The team was just the anchor tenant to unlock land value. When Howard Terminal failed, bogged down by port logistics, infrastructure costs, and political red tape, the entire business thesis for the A's evaporated. They were left with a decayed brand, a crumbling stadium, and no real estate upside. The collapse in Oakland wasn't just bad luck, it was the result of a strategic choice to prioritize land speculation over brand equity. They stopped selling baseball and started selling a development that never happened. Now forced into a corner, they are pivoting to Las Vegas, not as a conquering expansion team, but as a distressed asset looking for a bailout. Now we need to audit the actual mechanics of the escape plan. The legislative vehicle for this relocation is Nevada Senate Bill 1 or SB 1. Most headlines simply reported that the A's received $380 million in public funding, but when you read the actual text of the bill, you realize this is not a check being written to the franchise. It is a complex, conditional funding stack that places significant risk on the ownership group. The $380 million is broken down into three specific tranches. First, you have $180 million in transferable tax credits. These are not cash. The A's have to sell these credits to other corporations with Nevada tax liabilities to raise the actual capital. Second, there is approximately $180 million in Clark County bonds, which are essentially loans backed by the projected tax revenue of the stadium district. Finally, there is a $25 million credit for infrastructure costs. This structure is critical because it means the public contribution is capped. If the project goes over budget, the taxpayer is not on the hook. John Fisher is. And that brings us to the cost creep. When this deal was first pitched to the Nevada legislature, the stadium was priced at $1.5 billion. However, construction inflation and design changes, specifically the need for a retractable roof in the desert heat, have already pushed internal estimates toward $2 billion. That $500 million delta is pure liability for the ownership. Compare this negotiation to what the Las Vegas Raiders achieved just a few years prior. The Raiders secured $750 million in public money for Allegiant Stadium. The Athletics, negotiating from a position of desperation with a crumbling product in Oakland, secured roughly half that amount. It highlights a fundamental weakness in their leverage. The city of Las Vegas knew the A's had nowhere else to go, and the terms of SB 1 reflect that reality. This leaves a massive hole in the financing, often referred to as gap financing. With public funds capped at $380 million and a project cost hitting $2 billion, John Fisher has committed to providing $1.1 billion in private equity. For a liquidity perspective, Fisher's wealth is largely tied to Gap Inc. stock and illiquid real estate. To fund this stadium, he effectively has to liquidate family assets or take on private debt in a high interest rate environment. This is why we are seeing the frantic search for minority investors to buy a stake in the team. Fisher needs cash to close the gap he created. But the most immediate financial disaster is the Sacramento limbo. Because the lease at the Oakland Coliseum expires in 2024 and the Vegas Stadium won't open until 2028, the team is homeless. They have decided to play in a minor league park in Sacramento for 3 seasons. This is catastrophic for revenue. You are moving from a major media market to a secondary one, playing in a facility with a fraction of the capacity. The local media rights revenue, which is the lifeblood of any MLB team, will plummet during this interim period. They are effectively operating a minor league business with major league expenses for 3 years, burning cash right when they need to be saving it for construction. When we evaluate John Fisher using a strict CEO scorecard, the results are contradictory. If you judge him solely on asset appreciation, he looks like a genius. He and his partners bought the team in 2005 for $180 million. Today, despite the chaos, Forbes values the franchise at $1.118 billion. That is a 550% return on investment. However, if you judge him on operational competence, the ability to run a profitable, growing business, he has failed every metric. He has alienated the customer base, destroyed the local political relationships, and degraded the brand equity to near zero. So what is the future? There is a bull case for the Las Vegas move. The thesis is that the A's don't need loyal local fans, they need tourists. Las Vegas attracts over 40 million visitors annually. The strategy is to turn the stadium into an entertainment venue where the opposing team's fans buy the tickets. If the Yankees or Red Sox come to town, those fan bases will travel, filling the premium seats. The A's are banking on selling out high-margin luxury suites to casinos and corporations, potentially generating $50 million annually in premium revenue alone. In this model, the team on the field doesn't matter. The stadium is just a stage for tourists. However, the bear case is much darker. The risk is that the A's become a permanent road team. In sports psychology, home field advantage matters. If 70% of the stadium is cheering for the visitors, you cannot build a winning culture. Furthermore, the local Las Vegas residents, the people who buy season tickets and merchandise year-round, have already been burned by the Raiders' high prices. They might not embrace a second-tier baseball team that just abandoned its previous city. Then there is the macroeconomic threat of the regional sports network RSN collapse. For decades, baseball teams relied on massive cable TV contracts. But with the bankruptcy of Diamond Sports Group and the cord-cutting revolution, that bubble has burst. The A's are projecting a $100 million annual media deal in Vegas, but that number is based on 2015 economics, not 2025 reality. If they get to Vegas and find that the media rights are worth half that projection, the entire financial model of the stadium collapses. The executive takeaway here is stark. Relocation is not a cure-all for operational failure. You cannot simply move a broken business to a new state and expect it to fix the underlying culture. Successful sports ownership requires maximizing brand equity, not just real estate appreciation. You have to sell a story that people want to be a part of. The final verdict is that the Oakland Athletics, as they exist today, are an insolvent brand. They are currently supported only by MLB revenue sharing and the speculative promise of future tax credits. They have stripped the assets, sold the copper wiring out of the walls, and are now betting everything on a construction project in the desert. It is the ultimate gamble, and for the first time in 20 years, the house might actually lose. The moneyball era is officially dead. The new era is strictly about real estate arbitrage and tax optimization. Here is the single critical lesson for every business professional. Never let aggressive cost-cutting degrade your core product so severely that you lose all leverage in negotiations. If you want the full breakdown on how sports valuations are actually calculated, watch this video on the Dallas Cowboys next. Subscribe right now for more future financial deep dives.